You've been thinking about joblessness in America for many decades, and America's changed over those decades, sometimes in ways that are not necessarily for the better. Can you say a little bit about how you think America has changed, and what are the most important ways in which the job market in the U.S. in 2018 is different than the job market in the U.S. in 1978?
Terrific things have happened. We have seen a seismic change in the role of women, in the careers and the opportunities that women have, in the fraction of married women with children who are working. Society has made that possible. The society has accommodated it. It is a terrific thing that has happened. It is a terrific thing that while we've got huge remaining challenges of discrimination, we do much better in terms of assimilating minority groups into our labor market than we did years ago. There are, though, two troubling and related trends that I think deserve much more attention than they receive. The first is that the fraction of men who are not working or even trying to work continues to rise very rapidly. When I first started paying attention to these issues, which was in the late 1960s, something like 3 out of every 100 men, 4 out of every 100 men who was between the ages of 25 and 54 was not working. Today, that number is closer to 13. So we've seen a huge change in the number of able-bodied men at a stage in their life when there's a very strong social expectation of work who are not working. And if one looks at that, this is an area where the United States is mediocre at best by global standards. We think of ourselves as having dynamic, flexible labor markets, but the fraction of men not working in the United States, again, not retired, 25 to 54, is lower than it is in France. And if one looks at people who are entirely excluded, not working or looking for work, there the United States is pretty much at the top of the list of OECD, of rich countries, and all those men not working, even with big improvements over that 40-year period, 50-year period in healthcare indicators, I think is a matter that requires a lot of thought and probably policy attention.
How do you think about how we got to this point, how we got to 13 or 14% of prime-age males being jobless? We normally think about this as something about the connection of labor supply, the willingness of people to work, and labor demand, the demand of firms for workers. How do you attribute the relative importance of those two factors?
I think it's very hard to know. I think a great deal of this has to do with things that have happened on the demand side. The number of jobs that ask people to do difficult physically but routine tasks has declined very substantially in our economy due to technological changes. And that means the rewards to doing those jobs have gone down, and that makes fewer people willing to do them. At the same time, the number of people from outside the United States who are able to come to the United States and do those jobs has increased, and that represents competition for American workers as well. So I think there's a great deal on the demand side. Then there are a set of factors that are between demand and supply, what in earlier work Olivier Blanchard and I referred to as hysteresis effects. You know, work is habit forming and non-work is habit forming as well. And after several years on the sidelines, people are more reluctant to go back to work. They have lost the habit of work. Perhaps they've lost the taste for work. Perhaps they look riskier to employers. And so there's a sense in which lack of demand in the short run creates experiences for people that make them less able to supply labor when demand increases even in the longer run. So there's a sense in which this accumulates through hysteresis effects. There's another aspect, which is that I think when everyone else is at work, it's really embarrassing to not be at work. But when there starts to be a sizable community not working, it becomes more socially acceptable. And in that way, too, a demand problem becomes a supply problem. Now, there may also be, and some of my more conservative friends see this more on the supply side. They look at the generosity and greater generosity of disability insurance, for example, as a partial cause of these issues. And I think it would be a mistake to deny that that had any relevance. But as I look at the patterns across states, and as I look at the fact that most of those who try to get on disability and fail end up not working, and they are presumably less disabled than the people who are accepted onto disability, I'm inclined to put somewhat less benefit, less weight on those factors than more conservative observers.
So what do you think that automation, technical change, will mean for the future of work and joblessness in the U.S.?
I'm not sure, but I'll tell you this, Ed. When I was an undergraduate at MIT, there was great discussion of automation and its impact on employment. There was discussion of what was then called cybernetics, but we would today call artificial intelligence or robots on employment. And as an MIT economics undergraduate, I was taught a very strong view. I was taught by Bob Solow, the great MIT economics teacher of that era, that concern about automation was largely misplaced, that if it made workers more productive, it would make them richer, which would cause them to spend more, which would create more jobs for everybody, and that it was really a kind of crude Luddite fallacy to worry about the impact of automation. And that's what I graduated from college and believed for much of my career as an economist. I've subsequently come to think that suppose automation was reducing jobs, what form would it take? It would take the form of there being less and less demand for low-skilled labor. It would take the form of the wages of low-skilled workers falling. It would take the form then of fewer and fewer low-skilled workers actually working, and more of them deciding that they didn't even want to try to work. And that has been very much the picture in the 50 years since I was an undergraduate. So I don't think ideas about automation displacing jobs should be thought of as a futuristic issue. I think they should be thought of as a troubling aspect of progress that we've been living with for a long time.